Hello and welcome back to Salute Your Sports. Common and Chef here with Tom Castleman, ready for a massive show tonight, Tom. We'll be talking about so many great NFL and college topics, both. How about the Washington Commanders? Are you kidding me? Who thought Jaden Daniels would be this good? Last week, we even did a segment talking about the fluky starts. Are they for real? We didn't even put the Commanders on there. They are very much for real. 3-1 starts. Can Jane Daniels keep it going? Where does his hot start compare to other rookie quarterbacks and how well they've started? How about my Kansas City Chiefs? Another injury. Rashee Rice could be a long-term injury. Look pretty serious. Can they keep going this undefeated season going, or the injury is going to be too much? Will they not get the 1 seed in the AFC? What's going to happen to the championship Chiefs, who keep on barely winning, and more guys keep getting hurt? Plus, some massive games this weekend. Ravens, Bengals, Bills, Texans, Falcons, Bucks. Games that could decide divisions, wild card spots, playoff seeding, and more. We'll be making all those predictions. We recap the Bama-Georgia game, one of the best college football regular season games really of all time, Tom. I mean, it was terrific. Plus, baseball playoffs underway. We'll give our World Series picks, who makes the World Series, who wins it all, betting locks, sports trivia, and much more, Tom. I can't wait to get started. How are you doing tonight?
I am excited for the show. As you mentioned, we have a lot of great topics into which we are going to be diving. Chief among them, if you will, Kansas City, a team that coming into the season, I mean, everybody was saying this might be one of the better, if not best, three-peat chances that we're going to see in the NFL as far as going for 3 Super Bowls in a row. Simply because you have a quarterback in his prime, you have a coach who's in his prime. I mean, coaching primes obviously very different, but certainly Andy Reid and everything that he's been doing as a head coach certainly suggests that he is nowhere, close to the downside of his career, so to speak. Still creative, still a very motivating presence. And let's even go to a guy like Steve Spagnuolo, one of the assistant coaches who
So
I think
underrated.
probably gets. Well, I'd say he's rated. I think he's one of the more visible coordinators in the league. Certainly,
I would
every
say among
time.
the casuals, though. I think not enough casuals know who he is.
Sure. I mean, I all I know is that whenever it's Sunday night football, Thursday night football, whatever, announcers are always bringing up Steve Spagnuolo and his creativity, the pressures that he
Sure.
brings. So I think that he is well sung. I think, among more casual fans who don't necessarily get this into the nitty gritty, he might be lesser known. But certainly within the community, he is well regarded as a top coordinator. And frankly, that's been the story of the Kansas City Chiefs season. We mentioned the head coach and the defensive coordinator for this specific season in particular. We could even look at Patrick Mahomes and say, he's not in that MVP discussion right now, which is something that we kind of sort of would expect of him, just because of his long and lengthy pedigree, even at this early-ish stage of his career. Uh, but at the same time, we then look at what the Chiefs have gone through. They signed Marquise Brown in the offseason. He hasn't played a
Injured.
snap with the Kansas City Chiefs. He's not going to play a snap with the Kansas City Chiefs this year. He's on a 1-year deal. We'll see what happens with the next season, but he was brought in to be a key weapon on this offense. Rashee Rice, last year's rookie wide receiver, was really coming on strong. Just kind of a bang freak accident play, as there was an interception and he and Patrick Mahomes were both trying to make a play on the defender who became ball carrier. He has at the very least a hyperextended knee just by looking at the replays. We haven't received, I don't believe, an official
No.
diagnosis on the MRI, which could mean anything. I mean, it could be that everything is structurally still intact. It's going to be a sprain. He's going to be out for a little bit. Or it could simply be the Chiefs don't have to reveal any information, and so they're not going to this point for whatever reason, if it's leverage for a trade or whatever it may be. We just don't have that information yet. So, and Isaiah Pacheco, of course, their running back that they took in the 7th round a couple years back and have developed him into an every down back. That's 3 really key players on this offense that are not returning anytime soon, at the very least, if at all, this season. So Common, the Chiefs currently sitting at the 1 seed, currently are undefeated. Like you said, we've seen them in a bunch of these nitty-gritty close games. Do you think that they're going to be able to keep winning ugly, so to speak? I know it's the NFL. There are very, very, very few pretty wins in this league. Do you think that they're going to be able to keep carrying through? Maybe, hold on to that 1 seed? Or do you think that this is a team that maybe has like a little bit of a fall off and ends up being a 2 or a 3 or a 4 seed and has to take a different path through the AFC on their way to a potential three-peat?
Yeah, I'm going to say they're going to find a way to keep winning ugly because it is what the Kansas City Chiefs do. Champions find a way to win. This is a championship organization. Rashi Rice, by the way, from reading on it, Tom, best case scenario, 3 to 4 weeks. Worst case scenario, out for the season. So we'll see what happens with KC. There's some rumors about Amari Cooper potentially in a trade, which would be a massive, massive pickup if they can get Amari Cooper. Devontae Adams, more of an outside rumor. I know the money situation is a little bit tougher with him. Sounds like the Jets and the Saints are two frontrunners potentially for him. But Mahomes currently not necessarily in the MVP discussion. But you better believe that Patrick Mahomes, he starts putting up better numbers. They end up going 14-3. He'll be in that discussion by season's end because he is always at least in the discussion for MVP, or he gets the MVP himself. I think what's special about this Chiefs team is we talk about the offense, no Pacheco, no Rashi Rice, no Hollywood Brown. We talk about all these things, but their defense is still incredible and it's relatively healthy. Nick Bolton in the linebacker spot, Trent McDuffie in the corner spot. Obviously, we got ourselves Chris Jones, one of the best defensive tackles. They still have Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the game. They still have Andy Reid, the best coach. Steve Spagnuolo, arguably the best defensive coordinator. Their lack of options, I think Mahomes will get better as the season goes. He's just happened to be off a little bit, which every player has at some point. I think Mahomes will figure it out. I think the Chiefs will keep on winning because he has not played his best ball. They have not played their best ball. Travis Kelce just got involved this last week, finally. He hasn't been as involved. So look for him to get more going as well for Kansas City. I think they'll still get the 1 seed in the AFC. I mean, I'm looking at the top AFC teams. They already have the tiebreaker against the Ravens if it goes down to that. I don't think the Bengals are a legitimate 1 seed contender, but they have that tiebreaker as well. They play in a relatively weak division where they could definitely get some easy wins. The Bills, I believe they play the Bills head-to-head, so if they lose that game, that's their one route where maybe they get the 2 seed. Well, we just saw them go into Buffalo last year in the playoffs and win. So whether they get the 1 or the 2, sure, they prefer to get the 1, but they'll be a top 1, 2, or 3 seed. I don't think they'll be too phased by this. Kansas City will be just fine, in my opinion, Tom. And the thing is, if these guys get healthy and right in time for the playoffs, that's when it matters most. If they're healthy in the playoffs, Kansas City is going to be just fine.
Yeah, well, like I've been using this phrase a lot. The 4 wins that they have, that's money in the bank. So even if they end up slipping a little bit, they have a significant advantage. And they're going to have an advantage in the sense that, Patrick Mahomes has been far from stellar. I mean, 6 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. His QBR is, fairly low. I think it's like 57 and some change. He's not near the top of the quarterback performers this year. Now, that's definitely a weather versus climate type of conversation. I don't think that's indicative of the type of player that he is. But even if this is just going to be the type of season where, because there's a lack of firepower on this offense, where he's not going to be able to throw as many touchdown passes to outweigh significantly some of the interceptions that are inevitably going to be coming, that seems to be fine for this Kansas City Chiefs team. This is a team that, over the past season or two, I mean, yes, they've been really good on offense, but the thing that's been heralded almost more than the offense has been the defense. And that's something that I think we're seeing a little bit more swinging back, this pendulum of offense and defense in the NFL. Having a strong defense certainly is important for winning games, for winning championships, because this game that they had against the LA Chargers this past week is a perfect microcosm of that. There was one memorable good play that the Kansas City Chiefs had on offense. It was one big touchdown pass,
Worthy.
and that was the difference in the game. That was what allowed them to win 17-10, because LA went out, they scored a touchdown on the opening drive. It was 10-0 at one point. Everybody's just like, "Oh my gosh, this is going nowhere fast for the Chiefs." And then all they need was like one or two special plays here or there because their defense is that good that it can keep them in those games. I mean, looking at what they've done, 26-25 win over a Bengals team that has been underachieving so far this season. 5-point win over a middling Falcons team, 7-point win over the Ravens, which, that's a 7-point win, but also a toe because that one was coming down to literally the last play of the game. The Chiefs have been in some close ones, and they seem perfectly content, perfectly fine, and capable of being able to operate within that space because of the intangibles that they have built in, the culture that they have built in. It is interesting, though, that the schedule, I would say, is it's not the toughest schedule to start. They're definitely going to have some challenges ahead. If the 49ers are able to get a little bit healthier in a couple of weeks, how's that going to go? You mentioned at the Bills. They have a game against the Texans. The Texans are 3-1.
Another tiebreaker game.
Another tiebreaker game. Texans, as of right now, a little fluky. They're 3-1, but they have a negative 15 point differential on their season. So that's one of those ones where kind of
wins.
Raises a flag up in my mind of, okay, how for real is this team? There's still a little bit proving to do. By no means are the Chiefs incapable. By no means am I striking them from any chance of the 1 seed. But there's certainly some opportunities, some pitfalls for them ahead, some opportunities for other teams to make up that ground, primarily with Buffalo, with Houston. And then if it just ends up being, I know they have the tiebreaker over the Ravens, but if the Ravens just outplay them by a game throughout the rest of the season or 2 games throughout the rest of the season.
They got to play them by 2.
That could also be the difference.
They got to play them by 3. The Ravens have 2 losses.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, that's a long way back.
That's a long shot, but it's also, we still have 13 games to go and a lot can happen. And a lot of surprising things can happen. Certainly, a Washington Commanders team.
I want to get one more final note. I know
sure.
you're transitioning here. Xavier Worthy's a rookie. He's going to get better. Travis Kelce will play better. So I know these weapons are getting hurt, but Clyde Edwards-Helaire might be coming off the injured reserve.
Yeah,
he was on the other one. And by the way, Kareem Hunt looked pretty good last week, running back for the Kansas City Chiefs. Mahomes will get better. And you talk about winning with maybe not the best offense. Well, they won a Super Bowl last year with maybe not the best offense. So Kansas City is going to be A-okay, not worried about them one bit, Tom. I would still like to have Rice instead of not have him, but I'm not concerned per se.
Yeah, and that's what's going to be interesting to see how that kind of plays out. They got a game against the Saints team that has been mercurial, shall we say, 2 really, really great wins, and then 2 not so great losses on their ledger. It's going to be one of those things where
Chiefs find a way to win, the Saints find a way to lose, aka why Kansas City will win.
Yeah, and that one's in teams. Arrowhead, so that's going to be a good fun one. Certainly, though, I think the Niners in a couple of weeks, they're going to have that bye week in between the Saints game and the Niners game. That's going to be something that's going to be quite beneficial for Kansas City, but a test nonetheless as they go on the road for that. Another team that we were talking about is the Washington Commanders, and their hot start opening the season absolutely shellacked on the road. In Tampa Bay, the Buccaneers are winning that one 37-20. But since at home against the Giants, a 21-18 win. At the Cincinnati Bengals, a 38-33 win in a game where neither defense seemed particularly interested in stopping the opponent whatsoever. And then a game that was pretty exciting because it was a high point total, but nobody necessarily expected it to be a majority of the points to the Commanders. As they went on the road and beat the Cardinals 42-14. So, Common, this is a team that is now 3-1. You have them listed potentially as a favorite in the NFC East. It's only 4 games into the season. There's still plenty of ball to be played. Do you think that this is flash in the pan, or do you think that this is something substantial going forward?
It's probably somewhere in the middle. I mean, I think Washington's offense is the real deal. I think they have a couple good running backs, some solid receivers, and a really, really good rookie quarterback. I think they also play in the weaker conference, and they play in a pretty weak division. I think if the Philadelphia Eagles are fully healthy and the Dallas Cowboys are fully healthy, Washington's probably a close third. But right now, the Eagles have two starting wide receivers injured. Their locker room seems to be a mess. Dallas, Micah Parsons is also banged up currently. And as you like to say, Tom, they're 3-1. They're ahead right now. They have more room for error.
Hmm.
So definitely more margin for error. Definitely think Washington is closer to being for real as opposed to being a fluke. Like, are they going to win 75% of their games? No. Do I think they can finish above 500? Yes. Do I think they can win the division? I mean, this is a division where 10 wins probably wins the division. They're currently, what, 2 games over 500? They got to finish the rest of the season 1 game over, in my opinion, which is definitely possible. I do want to talk about Jaden Daniels a little bit in the context of what he's doing as a rookie quarterback. He is the only rookie quarterback ever with a better than 80% completion percentage through his first 4 games. In fact, Tom, in a stretch of 4 NFL games, the only time you've ever had a guy go 4 straight games with 80% or better, it was Peyton Manning in one of his MVP seasons, a 4 game stretch where the completion percentage was 80% or better. So second rookie to lead the team to back-to-back games of 38 points each, Russell Wilson being the first. I think of Russell Wilson. I think of Justin Herbert, who had that offensive rookie of the year performance, the most passing touchdowns. I think of RG3, a dual threat quarterback that really got things done early on in his career with Washington. I think of CJ Stroud, who had that incredible touchdown to pick ratio last year. Really good runner, really good passer, 4 rushing touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns, only 1 pick. Jaden Daniels to me is absolutely the real deal. He is absolutely fantastic. The one question mark for me isn't so much him and can he keep it up. I mean, I think the completion percentage is going to go down a little bit naturally, but I think some of those chunk plays, those down the field throws, some of those might go up. So I think he can more or less keep it up, maybe drop off a little bit. I'm a little concerned about their defense. So I don't think they're near the Super Bowl contender range. Are they an NFC East contender and a playoff contender? 100%, because the NFC East is not a great division right now. I would say it's probably 50-50. I'm just going to have fun with it because this is a fun show and we like to have fun. I'm going to go ahead and say they win the division because why not? Washington's fun. They have a great young quarterback. NFL was crazy. Any given Sunday, why not? Washington Commanders take home the NFC East.
Yeah, this is certainly an example of really good coaching again, because we look at what's been happening in Dallas with their defense. Who was their coordinator for the past few seasons? Dan Quinn, now the head coach for the Washington Commanders. And of course, you have Cliff Kingsbury as well, who had his struggles as a head coach in Arizona, but certainly knows how to design an offense and certainly knows how to kind of marry the college game to the professional game. That's part of, he was an integral component of Kyler Murray's development out in Arizona, and he's certainly showing off a similar set of chops here with the Washington Commanders and Jaden Daniels going from LSU to Washington. I'm a little bit more on the fence with this team. I kind of feel like this is a team that if I look at their schedule and play the game of, oh, that's a win, that's a loss, I just kind of get the feeling that this is going to be a team that's going to be ending up around
two
like
road
7,
wins,
10.
by the way. 2 road wins, and they beat the Bengals. 7-10, they're 3-1.
Like 7-10, 8-9, maybe 9-8 type of thing. I think that the Giants are not very good. I think the Cardinals, I mean, they were picking third in no small part because they were missing their quarterback last season. But the Cardinals certainly are in a similar position to the Commanders, where got some talented pieces on offense, defense pretty lacking. So I think that this is a team that really their best test so far this season was the Buccaneers to start. Maybe you could say the Cincinnati Bengals, but as we've learned with the Bengals, their defense has been much poorer than it has been in years prior. The offense has been getting better and better with that team, but you have a Bengals team that gave up was like 24, 27 points, something like that, to the Carolina Panthers. So certainly no stiff tests here. I think it's a combination of there hasn't been a super strong test for the Commanders, and also they're making the game easy for Jaden Daniels by doing some more college level stuff for him, which isn't a bad thing. Definitely play to your player's strengths. I do think that there's an opportunity, though, that as there's more tape on Jaden Daniels, that coordinators are going to say, okay, well, we can take some of this stuff away. Let's, we're going to find ways to make his life a bit more uncomfortable. I think that a game against the Cleveland Browns, for example, by no means am I a fan of that team or that franchise, but I will acknowledge they're typically pretty strong on defense. Similar with the Ravens the following week on the road. There's going to be a Bears game where the Bears have a very, very good defense this year. You've got Steelers, of course. Eagles, Cowboys, they've been kind of up and down. There's some star talent. We'll have to see what develops there. But what I'm saying is that they have the 3 wins in the bank. They're 3-1 to start the season. I think that there can be some rough patches ahead because it's not going to be as smooth of sailing going forward for this team. I don't think that this is a sustainable level of performance over the course of 17 games. I think it's good to start the season when the weather's really, really nice. Let's see how this team ends up when it gets a little bit colder, when it gets a little bit sloppier, when you're playing in Washington instead of Louisiana as it gets into October and November. And yes, December, not a time of year that college players are typically playing a week after week after week. That's where you have your exhibition bowl game, and that's it. So I'm just saying I'm not quite so bullish on the Commanders. Not to say that they can't be a 9-8 or even a 10-7 team, given that they have this hot start. I think that's wonderful and great for their team and for their franchise. But I'm going to pump the brakes a little bit and say there's plenty of pitfalls ahead and plenty of tests that they're going to have to overcome, and or just have as good learning experiences, because that's totally good too. If they're able to have the bonus of winning the division with a rookie quarterback and a defense that's not particularly outstanding, I mean, great. I just don't necessarily think it's that significant a chance of happening, especially because they haven't played the Cowboys or the Eagles that well. They have been up and down. They're still figuring some stuff out too, and have historically been much better teams over the past few years.
Yeah, let me counter that just real quick. Just a point on their schedule, which is something I think they have going for themselves. I know I agree with you. The schedule so far has been soft, but 42-14 in the NFL. You take that against anybody with how close these games have been in the National Football League. And then, Tom, here's the teams that play the next few weeks. They played the Browns, who are 1-3, who look really bad, who could not beat the Raiders without Max Crosby and Devontae Adams. So then they play the Ravens, which is probably a loss. But then they played the Panthers, which is probably a win. They played the Bears, which could go either way. They played the Giants, which is probably a win. The Steelers, who are decent, but Eagles, Cowboys. They play the Titans, Saints, Eagles, Falcons, and then Cowboys the last week. So it's very close. The more I think about it, Tom, I'm going to go ahead and pick Dallas to get first in the division. But I think Washington will be right there. I think definitely 9 wins. I would be surprised if they don't get 9 wins. And if they go 9-8, a winning record, whether you get the last playoff spot, the last wild card, or squeak out in the division, that is a good season. I would definitely say they're a playoff contender. No doubt about that.
For now, they
got a 3-1 start, first place in the division, a very soft schedule, and a very good young quarterback. They're a contender. I'll give them that.
Yeah, I'd say 9-8 is definitely an achievable upper limit of their
the
outcomes,
NFC East is 10 wins. They could get 10 wins, and it'll come down to tiebreakers. But I don't think you need to win 11 games to win the East. I mean, Dallas is 2-2. Philly is 2-2. So I don't know, and I don't think anyone's going to go 11-7 in that division, in my opinion, because both of those teams. I mean, the Cowboys are not a great football team. They have a few great players, but they don't have a running game, Tom. They don't have a run defense. They don't have a number 2 receiver. I mean, they have a great pass rusher in Micah Parsons. They have a great wide receiver in CeeDee Lamb. They have a good quarterback in Dak Prescott, but as we always talk about, like they have a few stars, they have a few flashy names, but
Hmm.
up and down the team, they don't have
They're more
such
of a
an
house of
incredible
cards. Yeah.
roster. Now, in the Eagles right now, Eagles would probably be my pick to win if they were healthy,
Hmm.
but they're out. Two starting receivers are out. Two of the best receivers in the NFL. So it'll be a very close NFC East. It'll be very competitive.
Hmm.
I would not be surprised if any one of those teams won, except for probably the Giants. But I guess Dallas should win. But I would like it to be Washington. That'd be fun.
Now this feels like an Eagles team that they've got. They're hosting the Giants, which even if you're not at
They
full
lost to them
strength,
last year.
they well, but this is a different year. I'm saying like the
Okay.
Eagles could very well win that game, go 3-2 heading into their bye week. Get Devontae Smith back from the concussion, get AJ Brown back from I believe is it an ankle injury that he's going through right now. I just feel like they can come out after a bye week firing certainly on more cylinders than they have been at this point. That's why they're still my pick
Okay.
to win the division. So yeah, I mean 9-8, like I said, definitely an achievable upper range of outcomes for the Commanders. With 7-10, I feel like being at the low and most likely, I mean everything's going to be this equilibrium status. 8-9, 9-8. That feels a lot more likely for this Commanders team. So we've got, like we said, a couple of big matchups coming up this weekend. We get a very fortunate division rivalry game that will be interesting. I mean, we've got the Ravens and the Bengals, two teams that, in certain ways, have been underperforming. I know that the Ravens are, I would say, a strong 2-2. They had that loss in the opener against the Kansas City Chiefs, but like we've said, I don't know how many times, came down to a toe where they could have won that game. Certainly, that's one where while it's a loss, kind of hard to feel like that's a bad loss, so to speak, given everything going on with that game. Bengals, in the meantime, they have been just, I don't even know. They had a really, really flat performance in week one against the Patriots. Like I said, they were able to put up points on the Commanders, but also couldn't stop them from putting up points. Got right with a decent enough margin of victory for some of us to be happy at home with that win over the Panthers, getting themselves off the schneid. But certainly does not get easier for the Bengals this week as they've got the Ravens coming. Who are you liking in this one? Do you think that the Bengals might be able to figure out enough things to have a chance to beat the Ravens? Or do you think that this might just be a year where they might be able to put up some points, but if they miss on a drive or two, they can't really count on their defense the way that they have in years past?
Um, it's a very interesting game because I think both of these teams, given their schedule, I would think they would both ideally be like 3-1 teams in this scenario. I think the Bengals are 1-3, a pretty good 1-3 team. The Ravens are 2-2. They should be 3-1 because they should have won the Raider game. Forget the Chief game, which
That too.
they easily could have won. I think it goes down in the same thing that I kind of said about the Ravens. If they commit to the run, they're going to win these games. I mean, Derrick Henry, 199 rush yards last game. Lamar Jackson, 54. Justice Hill had 18. 24 carries for 271 rush yards as a team. Only 19 passes for 156 yards. If they are running the ball, they're going to be very, very successful as a team. I would lean the Ravens because I think they have a better defense. I know we talk a lot about Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. They seem to have figured out the offense the last couple of weeks, but that Bengals defense isn't right. They gave up 26 points to KC, who's not great on offense right now. 38 to the Commanders, you kidding me? 24 to the terrible Panthers. So Ravens could put up 30 points on them easily. So Bengals gave up 155 rush yards and 5.3 yards per carry to Carolina. So I'll take the Ravens. That running game, if Carolina can do that to KC, to Cincinnati, I'm going to say that the Baltimore Ravens get it done. They beat the Bengals in a close game. Give me Baltimore.
Yeah, I'm going the same way. It's always tough having two teams that you're kind of like a pseudo tangential type of fan because I do like both of these teams a lot, and certainly the Baltimore Ravens has simply been executing. Like you said, there was the one game against the Raiders that's just like a weird, confusing, like how do you even lose that game? But they did. but having a strong showing for the most part against Kansas City, going out and really playing a great game this past week against the Buffalo Bills. That was a prime win on primetime television, and certainly making the big plays when they had to, and really just kind of deflating. Like it's really deflating to see just like a handoff go for 87 yards or whatever it was for Derrick Henry, where it's just like you almost have no chance in stopping that. It was just blocked perfectly. He found the hole and just like cut perfectly, and that's a huge explosive play that I don't think that the Ravens have really necessarily had as a complement to Lamar Jackson in the running game in years prior, because typically it's okay, we're gonna just pile up as many plays as we can in between the 20s. And then when we get down to the goal line, that's where it's your Gus Edwards or something like that. But to have a true playmaker in Derrick Henry at running back, that certainly has been a difference maker for the Baltimore Ravens. And it's going to be tough for teams to figure out. This offense isn't conventionally flashy, but it seems to accentuate his quarterback's strengths. I mean, Justice Hill, I believe, was the leading receiver for the Ravens, and that's because they're perfectly content to just work the check down game, work the short game,
It
mix in
works for
short
them.
run. Yeah, mix and run and short pass, and that's how you're able to move the ball, wear down a defense, and just play disciplined football. If you can stay in front of the chains, you're going to have a lot of success in this league. So
Mm-hmm.
this is one where I'm going with the Ravens as well. They're just playing at a better level, even with the Bengals winning last week against the Panthers. I mean, there was that Jamar Chase touchdown that went for 65 something yards, and it was because the Panthers just didn't tackle him like 7 different times. Like, how much of that is a win that is, again, much needed if you want to have any hope for the postseason still alive? And yet, it didn't necessarily feel like a great win against that Panthers team, where you have sorry, I had an alarm go off there that I
You're
forgot
good.
to shut down. Where you have a Panthers
It's
team
that
that's
time.
been anemic through most of the season, and has looked better with Andy Dalton at
They
quarterback, but
stink.
certainly not world beaters by any stretch. So I feel like the Bengals still need to put something together. I mean, they were able to show up big against the Chiefs again in a close loss there.
They'll be 1-4, Tom. They lose this game, they're not making the playoffs.
Yeah, it's kind of the fear that I have with this Bengals team. There's just like, they had their opportunities early on in the season. They had the games that they were quote unquote supposed to win. I also feel like this is one where the Ravens are going to pick up that win. The Bengals, just that much harder for them to have a shot at making the postseason. Speaking of the postseason,
Mm.
two teams that I think at this
Should be
point we can
there.
say are fairly confident will be there. A couple of division winners, with you and I both picking the Texans to come out of the AFC South. I believe you had the Bills winning the East. I had them as one of the wild card teams.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one where the Bills started out the season hot, 3-0, but then had their first real tough matchup of the season against the Baltimore Ravens. Common, do you think that they learned enough in that matchup? Do you think they kind of adjusted enough to, okay, we're playing at a higher caliber here? And also, I guess on the flip side, like I mentioned earlier, Texans 3-1, but at a minus 15 point differential. Do you think that they qualify as that type of caliber of team that maybe could give the Bills some struggles? This seems like a pretty interesting game where both teams stand the opportunity to make a statement.
Yeah, this is a massive game, by the way, when it comes to playoff seeding,
Hmm.
whether we're looking at, whether it's the 1, the 2, or the 3. They could be both be division winners. Obviously, they would both love to have home playoff games. Houston, young quarterback, some young key players. Buffalo knows how to play in the cold. Obviously, having home games in Buffalo will be massive for them. Both teams are 3-1, but I've been far more impressed by Buffalo. I think Buffalo's had one of those bad first halves and just a little bit of bad luck that game. Obviously, Derrick Henry, fantastic run, but that's just like right off the bat to be behind based on one play early against such a good team. Difficult to see for sure. Very, very difficult for them. You look at the second half, they came out playing really good ball early, then a bad luck. I know it was a fumble, but Josh Allen, they tried to run a trick play. They got too cute at the wrong time, and it didn't work out. But their wins have been really, really good. I mean, I hate to do the whole common opponent thing. I know that's really not that fair, but you got to put a little bit of credence to it. The Buffalo Bills beat the Jaguars 47-10. The Houston Texans beat the Jaguars 24-20. Late touchdown at the end of the game to win that game that easily could have gone to overtime, that easily could have been a W or a loss rather. They beat a bad Colts team by 2 points, barely the first game of the season. They beat a Bears team by 6 points. Not a great Bears team. A Bears team that's getting better, by the way. I think, Caleb's gotten a lot better the last 2 weeks. That Bears team in week 2 definitely was an absolute mess. And then the one good team they played, they lose 34-7 to Minnesota. I really like CJ Stroud, but I like Josh Allen even better. I think Buffalo's defense, a lot of question marks. A new look defense, for the most part, they've looked pretty good. The Ravens game was tough, but there's a lot of teams that struggle against that Ravens running game. Buffalo's not the first and will not be the last team to do so. So I like Buffalo better. I think the Buffalo Bills win that game. Massive, massive game when it comes to playoff seeding. Give me the Bills, baby. Buffalo. It's in Houston, right?
It is in Houston.
Yeah.
This is a tough one.
Be different. Be different.
No, I am, but certainly not with any sort
Conviction.
of gusto or conviction. I think that there's
gusto. That's a Castleman word. I know what it means, by the way, Tom. I know what gusto means.
Good, yeah,
but it's definitely a Tom Castleman word.
Yeah, this is an interesting matchup because, I mean, oddly enough, like how much of this comes down to Joe Mixon's health? Like if he's in as a viable, weapon and in the running game, something that the Texans have been missing the past couple of weeks. I mean, we saw how they came out and started the season with him piling up.
Is he going to be rusty though? Like Jordan Love was rusty. I know he's a running back, but is there a little bit of
different.
rust?
No, I don't think there's rust for a running back. I think with a running back, you come off that, it's just like, no, it's rest more than anything else. I mean, that's
okay.
I mean, he had an outstanding performance to start the season with, what was it, like 30 carries or something along those lines, like a really, really good start to the season. So I think if they have a little bit more of that complementary football, I'm not sure Tank Dell's health as he was sitting out this past game against the Jaguars. So I think that I'm going to lean Houston a little bit, but this is certainly, I think, a test for both teams because, like we said, I mean, both teams beat the hapless Jacksonville Jaguars, so that's
by way different amounts.
By way different amounts, but
way
still
different.
A team that's 0-4 to start the season. Certainly not a strong, opponent there. So it's one of those ones where it's like, okay, this is the Texans' opportunity to try to see, okay, how legitimate can we be? I think they maybe got caught a little bit off guard by the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, that was just a game that nobody was really expecting. So I'm going to go with Houston ever so slightly on this one, although it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if Buffalo is able to go out and win by a big margin because, yeah, they had a rough game against the Baltimore Ravens on the road, but that's just a heck of an environment, and that's a heck of a team. The thing with the Texans that I'll admit that I kind of glossed over, didn't maybe necessarily take into account as much when kind of talk about them preseason, as this is a team that can be an AFC title contender. They were a game away from being out of the postseason. It came down to week 18. And if the backup running back for the Indianapolis Colts catches the ball, the Colts win the division. They're in the playoffs, and we're not even, we're thinking about, the Houston Texans can be an up-and-coming story of like a wild card contender. Like that one little change that won them the division and got them in certainly has done a lot.
CJ Stroud missed a couple games, I will say.
Sure.
But yeah.
Sure. But there's a little bit more of an outsized expectation based on how last year went. So I think that I still do really like the Texans as a team that is going to be one of the top 3-4 teams in the conversation. I've got them right there with Baltimore. I guess at this point, we can keep Buffalo in that conversation. I was a little bit hesitant on them. Of course, Kansas City's in there. So I think this is like a really, really important game fairly early in the season. I'm going to take the Texans by a slim margin. But it's certainly going to come down to, are the Bills going to be able to continue to try to work this, no star receiver, therefore everyone can be utilized
Let's eat,
effectively on the
baby.
offense.
Let's eat.
Are they going to be able to attack the middle of this Texans defense with Dalton Kincaid? That can be a significant matchup. And then, of course, I mean, Nico Collins is a world beater as a wide receiver for the Texans. So it's going to be a really, really fun game. I can hardly believe that this game is going to be played at noon on Sunday. This definitely feels like it should be in that 3:25 slot on CBS or something along those lines. I mean, Bills played Sunday Night Football last week, so there's no real sense in putting them in Sunday Night Football. Again, you definitely want to spread out that primetime coverage.
Houston's played Sunday Night Football too. And those I think those are predetermined early in the season anyway.
Yeah, no, this is
flex at the end.
This is a treat for the noon slate viewer this upcoming Sunday. So that's going to be a lot of fun to see. And then we're going to close out our NFL pick'ems for some matchups here with another NFC divisional South rivalry, certainly less heralded, shall we say. We've got the Falcons 2-2. The Bucks, I believe, are they also 2-2? I know I just had that up. 3-1 for the Tampa Bay.
Yeah, Bucks are 3-1, man.
So for this one, this is just a whole division where Carolina's bleh. But other than that,
the other three are wide open.
Yeah, it's kind of a wild card situation here. So, Common, where are you going? Where are you leaning in this matchup? This one is in Tampa, I believe.
No, in Atlanta.
Oh, it's in Atlanta. Okay, so
in Atlanta.
So it's in the Dome. It's in the Georgia
best
Dome.
Sports stadium out there. Where concessions when I went to watch the Messi game in the summer, I think it was huge chicken tenders, huge fries. I'm a big guy, Tom. Huge serving, bigger than what you get at the Cubs game. I was full. It was for $6. Chicken tenders and fries combo for $6.
Now, do we need to take into account the event that was going on? Like, are they charging
it's always
$6?
The same. Always the
same.
Even
for football games.
Football games, $6.
Tip of the cap to Arthur Blank.
Yeah, they're the best.
Looking out for the little guy.
Waters were like $3. I want to say, which is cheaper. I think they're usually 6 or 8 at Soldier Field. And beers were also like, I want to say $5 or $6 instead of like 9, 10, or 11. Everything is cheap there.
I need
with
to
the
move myself
Atlanta
to Atlanta. I'm a Falcons fan. Go
air-conditioned stadium. It's beautiful. Great game day experience.
That's a must. That's a must in that part of the world.
Parking, Tom Castleman. Very, very convenient parking. You can walk 7 minutes away from the stadium. On the game day, they send you details of where to park. They actually tell you where the parking is. And unlike Soldier Field, where it's $55, parking $25. So Atlanta Falcons, Atlanta, the Mercedes-Benz Superdome.
That's a team for the people right there. That's a team of the people.
The best stadium experience in all of sports, Tom Castleman. I absolutely love that stadium. As for the game, I got to have one caveat, one asterisk. I still am not fully convinced in the Bucks. I want to see which Tampa Bay team we're going to see because I think 3 out of 4 games, Tampa Bay has looked amazing. Was the Denver Bronco game more of just one of those bad games, or is it going to be sort of an inconsistent Tampa Bay team? I'm going to lean the Bucks here on the road just because their offense has been really flowing this season. Baker Mayfield has looked great. They got a couple good running backs. Obviously, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, 2 terrific wide receivers. And the Atlanta Falcons, I'm starting to think personally, Tom, I don't know if it's Kirk Cousins being a little bit older coming off an injury, but are Drake London and Kyle Pitts, even Bijan Robinson, who's the best of the bunch, are they quite as good as advertised? Like, obviously, Desmond Ridder was a terrible quarterback. I definitely think they have good weapons, but are those guys good weapons or elite weapons? Because they've looked very, very mediocre so far this season. You look at the Falcons, their offense has been actually pretty darn bad, Tom Castleman. They actually, let's see, they scored 22 points against the Eagles, but a bad Philadelphia defense, late drive to win the game. They only scored 17 against the Chiefs. You look at this most recent game, Tom, not a single offensive touchdown. They actually had a defensive touchdown, a muff punt special teams touchdown. Not to mention they also had themselves a 5 or was it 6 field goal performance from their kicker.
Mhm.
So they just won a game without getting a single offensive touchdown. That muff punt was a little bit lucky. The interception was tipped. So the field goal was 58 yards at the end. They've been kind of fortunate, I would say. Atlanta Falcons, I'm very, very concerned about their offense. I like Tampa's offense better. I like Tampa's team better. Give me the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in this game for my pick. They clobbered the Eagles, by the way. Washington, they clobbered the Commanders. I lean more is that Bronco game was just a weird game. The Bucs have been far more consistent. I don't know. Atlanta, they're kind of rubbing me the wrong way, Tom. That offense is really, really rubbing me the wrong way personally.
Yeah, which is kind of an odd thing because I believe that they're coordinators of the McVay tree, which is known for having like a really friendly scheme guys open type of offense, especially when you have a veteran quarterback that knows how to get playmakers the ball. And so far, I mean, there's been one playmaker at the very least, former Chicago Bear Darnell Mooney.
Darnell Mooney's the guy they're going to.
Leads the team
Darnell
with 225 yards receiving. So that's certainly questionable. I mean, tight ends never really been featured, I don't think, in McVay offenses. So maybe that's why Kyle Pitts is to the wayside. The Falcons just consistently feel like a weird type of team, and I'm not really sure what it is when it comes to their on-field performance, where they can have, you know, a good win on the road against the Philadelphia Eagles, and then they have like this really weird close win against the Saints at home, which could have been a much easier field goal.
They should not have won.
Like Kirk Cousins toward the end, like he could have made different decisions that set up maybe a
throwing
48.
Deep.
Like check, like you have a good kicker, like check it down instead of making him kick a 58-yard field goal. Like I think they did deserve to win. I think that they just could have made it easier, which is part of the weirdness. Like that should have been something.
By the way, Tom, Inter Miami wins. Big money on the betting front. Go Messi. They have the supporter shield, the most best regular season record. Massive win against the second best team in the MLS tonight on the road. Inter Miami 3-2. Sorry to cut you off. I am pumped.
Well, I'm certainly glad that we teased that for the audience at any point during the show. but that's like that goes into the weirdness of this team with Kirk Cousins and everything. And you know how I feel about him. He's puts up numbers, but overall, I'm not going to say he's like this outstanding win with quarterback. And I'm going to probably lean no on that one. So I'm also going to go with the Buccaneers. I know it's Thursday Night Football. It's on the road. It's a little bit odd, but looking at that Broncos loss, I mean, just seeing how that defense plays, for whatever reason, the Broncos just feel like a team where they're like,
they have a good defense.
They have a really good defense, so I kind of feel like they're in a similar category, different tier. I want to emphasize that of the Kansas City Chiefs, where they're going to stay in these crummy games.
I know what you're talking about.
Or they're like the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Those are massive tiers.
Well, yes, but like similar category where it's like the Pittsburgh Steelers, where like the defense is going to keep you in. You just have to make a play or two or three on offense, and that's going to be the difference, because your defense is just going to suffocate the life out of the opposing team. That's what they did against the Jets. That's what they did against the Buccaneers. Granted, those aren't the staunchest or the best high-flying offenses, but looking around the league, who really has one of those on a consistent basis as of right now? Like even the team that we would consider, the team that we would put up there numero uno, the Kansas City Chiefs, they haven't really had a super consistent offense to this point. So that's why it's kind of, this little bit year of the defense, or at least to the start of the season.
Defense is back,
It's been the year of the defense, which is really, really nice. As a football fan, I don't hate the aesthetic of good defense. I think there's a difference between exciting and good football, which we'll get into in just a few moments. But I'm going to go with the Buccaneers with this one. I feel like I think they're playing the more consistent brand of football right now. And I certainly think that they'll be able to figure out enough things. I don't think that the Falcons really merit the home field advantage. Therefore, I give them a significant enough edge to win. I
No.
think the Buccaneers are a good enough
They
team,
just
or at
have
least a close enough team to be
great
able to win
great
this one.
concessions, baby.
Hey,
Great
I mean
game day experience. We
that's a
got to
win.
go to a Falcons game together sometime, Tom, or
That
the
was-
SEC championship, which could be one we see in the future of these two teams we're about to talk about next. There's your
That's
transition.
true. That's true. We are probably going to have a matchup between the Georgia Bulldogs and the Alabama Crimson Tide. I mean, this is part of the reason why I'm going to rail a little bit for a moment against the college football playoff, because this feels almost exactly like what we have with the NFL. These two teams met up early on in their college football season. They could very easily meet up for the SEC championship game, and then with this 12-game college football playoff, they could meet up again at some point in the postseason as well. So this is the opportunity to have, a best of three type of situation, or at least most important of three situation,
Sure.
depending on how things go. So, as a quick recap, Alabama gets the win. You and I were texting back and forth a decent amount about this game, because at one point I was just like, how do we even think that Georgia had like any chance of winning? Like, look at how this team is playing. It's 28-0. It's absolutely abysmal. And then Georgia comes back to the point where they're winning and they look like they're going to be able to complete the comeback before Alabama goes out and makes another amazing play and they end up sealing the victory late. Comment, I know you were saying, this is one of the greatest college football games of all time. I'm going to say
regular season games. Regular season
no.
games.
No,
not one of the greatest regular season college games.
No, because because
you turned it off and then you turned it on at the end when it got close. Is that what you're saying?
I had it on the entire time. It wasn't. It was exciting. It was back and forth, but Carson Beck did not play outstanding football. Even when they were he
played outstanding football for most of the second half.
A lot. I'll say his
clutch on fourth down.
His receivers bailed him out on a lot of plays. There were a lot of ball placement issues, especially down the field on some of those vertical routes, where a receiver is, having to contort, track back to the ball. He wasn't making it easy for his receivers the way that Jalen Milroe does. Like, for me, a great football game is when both teams are playing like smooth, crisp, optimal football, and people are making plays, people are doing the right things. When the quarterback's off a little bit, I feel it was an exciting game. I don't think that it was, technically speaking,
you know what I'm going to call you?
Football game.
I'm going to call you Ebenezer Scrooge. Scrooge.
Hey, one of my favorite lines of literature ever written.
Oh, here we go.
Comes from The Christmas Carol.
Okay.
And the line is, "The dark was cheap and Scrooge liked it."
That's you. That's you.
That's me. I mean, I like keeping the house relatively dark. You probably like
the clean 9-6 Bama LSU game, like when we were in college. That's probably what you like better.
Yeah, 3-4 yards, a cloud of dust, field position, get your kicker placed up. That's hyperbole, of course. I do like more offense than that. This was a crazy, wild, exciting game. It wasn't great, though. Like, a great football game is the Kansas City Chiefs and the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl, where guys are going back and forth and everybody's making plays. That's a great game in my book. This was a little too backyard football by the seat of your pants type of thing, if that's making any sense.
Okay. Well, first off, I'll talk about the game, but I'll kind of talk about what it means for these two teams. I know I have it phrased here in the question as well. Like, walking away from the game, which team do we think is better? Which team do we think would win a rematch? Because definitely it was a weird game. I know it's happened before, but I would say usually when there's a crazy comeback, it's the better team that is playing so much better, struggles in the beginning and then they come back. It's not surprising. I think we can agree these are fairly even matched teams, regardless of who you think is better. They're on that same level. And to see Alabama go up 28-0 in the first quarter, absolutely dominate Georgia. Georgia can't do anything on offense. They cannot touch Jalen Milroe. They cannot touch the Alabama Crimson Tide. And then in the second half, all of a sudden, Jalen Milroe can't even complete a 5-yard pass. It was one of the most massive like turnarounds I've ever seen. So I thought for me it was very captivating. It was very dramatic. It was a crazy, crazy football game. Was Bama that much better? Is Bama that much better in the first half? Is Georgia that much better in the second half? The truth is somewhere in the middle. I think it comes down to like I lean Georgia overall is a slightly better football team overall. Carson Beck did have 3 turnovers, which Jalen Milroe played better of those 2 guys. But if they play again, I would be hard pressed not to pick Alabama because it's something about having that team's number. Alabama has now beaten Georgia 9 of the last 10 meetings. In the last, I think, was it 2 or 3 years?
9 times.
9 out of 10, Tom. 9 out of 10. The only loss was in the national championship a few years back, which, by the way, Lion star receiver Jameson Williams got hurt in that game. If he doesn't get hurt, that could be a very, very different result in that national championship game. But I was going to say, Tom, I think Georgia is slightly better. Like against Texas, I would give Georgia a slightly better chance to win. But head to head, I would lean Bama. This was at Alabama. You want to keep that in mind. It was at Alabama, this game. But it's something like there's something to be said about having your opponent's number, the matchup within the matchup. I know a lot of it was Nick Saban versus Kirby Smart. Nick Saban knows his former assistant. Well, it turns out Kellen DeBoer is a pretty darn good football coach. And I got to talk about this new wide receiver for Alabama, Williams. The kid, I think he had 6 catches, 177 receiving yards. Tom, he is 17 years old. He has the one catch where he's juggling the ball up in the air, catches the ball, then he's got the walk-off touchdown at the end where he spins between 2 guys. The guy is absolutely electric. I think Jalen Milroe, too. Jalen Milroe is a better college quarterback than Carson Beck. I know Carson Beck is a better pro prospect because of his arm ability, but Jalen Milroe has come such a long way as a passer. He's legitimately a good NFL passer. He's a future NFL quarterback. Is he a first-round pick? Is he a lottery pick like Carson Beck is? I don't know. But at the college level, with his dual threat ability, I would argue he's a better college quarterback than Carson Beck. And if you have the better quarterback in a college football game, it does go a long way. 374 pass yards, 117 rush yards, 4 total touchdowns, only 1 pick for Milroe. Ryan Williams, 6 catches, 177 yards, and a touchdown. I think we'll see this matchup again, whether it's the SEC championship game, the college football playoff. We're going to see it again. And I know your argument and your thought, Tom, is this game would mean more if it wasn't for the playoff. I'm going to argue the other way. I actually like that we have the playoff because I want to see more of this. I want to see these 2 teams go at it again. I want to see what happens in the playoff if these 2 teams meet. I want to see what happens in the SEC championship game. Because personally, when I look at college football right now, Tom, I would lean Texas right now, but I look at Texas, I look at Georgia, I look at Bama. All 3 of those teams are roughly evenly matched, and we could see them play each other multiple times this year between the SEC championship game and the college football playoff. And personally, Bama, Texas, Bama, Georgia, Georgia, Texas, multiple times this season, sign me up. Let's go. I'm ready.
I mean, it certainly would be compelling. It's just a different environment that it used to be. As far as, who do I think is going to win in a rematch? I'm going to use a little bit of a baseball analogy since we're going to have that in our show as well. You have 2 guys running to first. One guy has perfect form and runs to first, and then the next guy goes and he has horrible form but reaches first base at the same time that the first guy does. Who do you pick? As the guy you want on your team, you only pick the guy with bad form because once you get him in good form, he's actually going to be faster. That's what it kind of feels like with this Georgia team. We're watching that first quarter where it's 21-0. Early second quarter, it's 28-0. This felt like a game where it was really, really uncharacteristic for Georgia, where they just got hit in the mouth, and they just kind of like just stood there blinking for 15, 17 minutes because they didn't know what the blazes was going on. I mean, at one point on offense, you talk about there's 3 interceptions from Carson Beck. There's also a safety that the Georgia Bulldogs relinquished to the Crimson Tide that at that point made it 30-7 heading into halftime. And then the second half, that was all Georgia. I think honestly, toward the end of the game, it wouldn't surprise me if the Georgia defense was just completely burnt out by the sheer effort of having to just keep that Alabama Crimson Tide team in control. I mean, if we're looking at how the points go out, I mean, there's 2 points in the second quarter for that safety. Otherwise, it was 7, 3, and 8 to close out the final 3 quarters of the game for the Georgia Bulldogs defense. I think they had a really bad first quarter, and that, of course, can tank an entire game. The likelihood of that happening a second time, I think that's pretty low. I think that the chances of Carson Beck having another 3-interception game, fairly low. So if I'm going to say, hey, there's going to be a rematch somewhere down the line, whether it's the SEC championship or in the playoff at some point, certainly I'm not going to say it's Georgia in a landslide. But I think I'm going to end up with the same conclusion that I did prior to this one, where Georgia with a slight lean, a slight edge in my book. I know we're probably, like you said, we're going to revisit this game at some point. I don't think necessarily that it would be indicative to look at the score and say, well, Alabama won before, therefore they are going to win again. Looking at this game, I think that there were too many just happenstance things that went really, really right for Alabama. To their credit, they capitalized on all of those opportunities that Georgia laid out for them. I just think that Kirby Smart, the caliber of coach that he is, it's not going to be that level of ease, of error, of carelessness. That might be a little too strong of a word. But certainly, like, Georgia was playing
You
tight.
think Georgia played their worst game possible in the first
possibly
half?
Their worst game of the in that first quarter, first half? Yeah, possibly. I know that they weren't great against Kentucky, and maybe this is something where we need just a little bit more sample size to see where Georgia really is as far as kind of sounding and finding their depth. But based on historically what we know of the program, I would say that they just had like a really bad instance of football, and I think that in a rematch, I think this would actually
So
not necessarily help.
You don't
I think
put
it'll
too
do
much
better.
credence in any sort of mental or sort of matchup edge with Bama having won 9 of the last 10, Tom? You don't really care too much about that. I know that stretches over more than 10 years.
Right.
I know that's part of it.
Yeah,
But
like
man,
that's the sort of thing
Bama's
that
won the last 2
mhm.
matchups,
Yeah.
the most recent 2 matchups.
Yeah, I don't necessarily take a ton of past performance and put that into future indication,
Fair.
especially when it's a small size and when there's as much turnover as there is in the college game. Like, how many of those matchups, obviously the coaching was the same, but in how many of those matchups were, the quarterback the same? Like, probably no more than 2 or 3 of those games. Same thing with players on offense, players on defense. So I think that you can maybe contribute that or attribute that to coaching. Now that Nick Saban's gone, I don't buy as much into the historical component of those sorts of matchups.
All right. Well, let's talk baseball, baby.
Let's
Baseball
talk
playoffs
baseball.
underway real quick, Tom.
Mm-hmm.
I found myself watching a regular season baseball game on Monday. And, me personally, I grew up being like equally a fan of baseball, football, and basketball, if not baseball number one. I have tuned out baseball a little bit over the years. Obviously, I work a lot of nights. I work a lot of, a sports job, a lot of late hours, have a girlfriend now. Life gets busy. I can't
Sure.
watch every game like middle school and high school Kamenechev did. But speaking of some of the best regular season games, I want to give a shout out to the game Monday afternoon. New York Mets, Atlanta Braves, 3-zip Atlanta. They take the lead. It looking like a low-scoring game. It's over. The Mets battle back, put up like 6 in the 8th. Then the Braves come back, retake the lead in the bottom half of the 8th. Then Francisco Lindor goes deep in the 9th. playoff spot on the line. They both ended up making the playoffs because Atlanta won the next game. D-backs on the outside looking in. But what in the world was that regular season baseball game on Monday? It was terrific.
Yeah, and there's a lot of terrific baseball going on. We have had the wild card round already underway. We have a couple games going on at the moment. We have the San Diego Padres with a lead over the Atlanta Braves early on in that game, and the Padres already have a 1-0 lead on that series. One game.
It's actually best of 3-2 in this
It is
opening
best
round.
of three. So if the
it's
Padres hold
over
on
if
to
the Padres win.
exactly, with the Mets and the Brewers, the Mets, I believe, have the one game advantage.
Yeah,
But
Brewers are up
looking at that
5-3
game,
though right now in the
yeah, so
ninth.
that is going to be that one might be going to a full 3 games. On the AL side of things, just like everybody had it, 3 AL Central teams have advanced through the playoffs to this point, just like everybody drew it up.
Sure.
The Guardians, the second seed, caught that bye, and then of course the Tigers making it in as the 6th seed, sweeping the Houston Astros, and then the Kansas City Royals sweeping the Baltimore Orioles. So that was 2 teams where
Orioles could not hit.
Orioles were a team that I thought had a decent chance to win the division, to make a deep run into the playoffs. Of course, the Yankees have the 1 seed after winning the division, having the best record in the American League. But Astros and Orioles were 2 teams that I thought for sure were going to be teams that could make some noise deep into the postseason. Thanks to this short wild card series, their seasons come to the end. The AL West does not have a representative in the postseason. I mean, if you want to see, the White Sox having a huge outsized size of importance on the playoff makeup this year, look no farther than the Tigers and the Royals. So I believe outside of games against the Chicago White Sox had losing records on the season.
And they both won their opening playoff matchups, though.
Yeah, I mean, that's what this is. It's not about the best team. This is a tournament where the team that just happens to win a few games wins. This is closer to March Madness than it is to NBA Finals, as far as determining the best team in the sport. So, Common, let's start with the AL side of things, just because that's clear cut. We have the Tigers and the Guardians. We have the Royals and the Yankees. So, out of the 4 teams that we definitively know remain there, who do you like to have coming out of the American League winning the pennant?
Well, so I think we've seen a lot of these. I don't want to use the word Cinderella, but I think it's fair. Cinderella teams, a lot of the wild card teams, winning the World Series, making the World Series. I think there's been a lot of cases where the best team has not won the whole thing. Whereas when I grew up as a kid in the, you look at the late 90s and early 2000s, Yankees usually had the best record in baseball, if not the best, certainly right there, like second best or something. And they usually won the World Series. It was a much different time. We've seen defense come back in the NFL. I'm going to say the best baseball teams are making a comeback in these playoffs, in part because I want to be right. My preseason pick was Dodgers, Yankees in the World Series. We have the 2 teams with the 2 best records in baseball. Actually, technically, Philadelphia is ahead of New York, but New York is 3rd best, number 1 in the American League. I'm going to pick the Yankees to make the World Series. They've got probably, if not the 2 best players in the American League, 2 of the top 3. Obviously, Bobby Witt Jr. is spectacular for Kansas City, but I would probably say Aaron Judge is the best player in the American League, and Juan Soto is probably the 3rd best player in the American League right now. So that 1-2 duo is absolutely electric. I mean, these guys, the baseball game today, it is pretty rare to have people that hit for power and for average. Juan Soto and Aaron Judge do both of those things. And you got to face them back-to-back in the same lineup. That is murderer's row. What I've liked about the Yankees this year is their starting rotation has been much improved. The start has been much better than we expected. Look for Garrett Cole to have a massive postseason. I like the Yankees to make it out of the American League, but I also like the Royals. So I'm going to say the winner of the Yankees-Royals matchup because the Royals are always pesky. They've made playoff runs just barely getting in the past. So I think the winner of the Yankees Royals is definitely my pick to make it to the World Series. Definitely looking forward to a fun series between those two teams.
Yeah, I'm also going with the Yankees in small part because they were also my preseason pick to make it to the World Series, but also because I just want to highlight a couple different things. And these are large, overarching numbers. There's certainly deeper and better analytics you can use, but this is just snapshot glance. The Yankees in the American League by far and away best team in terms of run differential of
Mhm.
plus 147. The Guardians, Royals, Tigers. They're all pretty decent. Plus 87 for the Guardians, plus 91 for the Royals, plus 40 for the Tigers. And you remember that stat I threw? I don't have the exact numbers for both teams, but the Royals and the Tigers. You take away those Chicago White Sox games, they have a losing record on the season. And of course, they're playing in the same division as the Chicago White Sox, who have. Do you want to just take a quick guess, Common? What do you think the run differential is for the White Sox? Keep in mind, negative numbers are a thing.
Mm. White
We're do-
Sox negative 170 on the season.
keep going.
Worse than 170?
Worse than one. Keep going. We're
I know
doing
they're about
trivia. We're doing trivia early
they were
here.
about 80 games under 500. So that means that they lost by more than 2 runs on average. Let's go negative 230.
Keep going.
Negative 280.
Keep going.
Really? That bad? Negative
Negative
300.
306.
So that means they
Chicago
lost
White
by
Sox.
an average of roughly, what is that? Almost 4 runs a game.
Something like that. It would be what, like 306 divided by, well, they play 162 games.
They won
So
how
that
many?
means on
42?
average, they were outscored
41.
by
They were
slight.
exactly 80 games under.
Yeah.
So whatever 306 by 80 is, that's getting close to,
They
because 8 times 4 is 320. So close to 4 runs per game, a little bit under
just
4 runs per game.
just dividing it by the total number of games on average, they were outscored by 1.8 runs per game, which is ridiculous over
Oh,
the
yeah, I
course
went
of a
with their wins.
162
Yeah,
game
1.8.
sample size. That's absolutely bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
So suffice to say, yeah, the Royals and the Tigers get upsets in their 2 game sample sizes. But looking at a 162 game sample size, these teams aren't nearly as good as they otherwise might seem,
Sure.
based on a common opponent that they all got to play. And you talked about the pitching for the Yankees; that's been really good. But I mean, Aaron Judge, Juan Soto, like there's just so much good stuff. Gleyber Torres, their entire lineup is absolutely dominant. Where even if one or two guys aren't hitting, you have other guys that can pick up the slack. Whereas for these other teams, the Guardians, the Royals, and the Tigers, a lot less margin for error. So I feel pretty comfortable picking the Yankees as well. Where it gets interesting is going over to the National League side of things, where, of course, Dodgers, best record in baseball, Phillies, second best record in baseball. They've gotten to take a little bit of a breather. They got to sit above the fray watching as potentially a couple of division rivals might get eliminated here. The Mets currently, like you said, in a battle with the Brewers.
The Brewers
That one
just won.
just won. So that is
1-1
going
in
to
the
go
series.
to a third game to see if the NL Central will continue to have a representative or if the Mets will make it through. And then, of course, Padres and Braves. That is certainly not looking good
Padres
for
up
Atlanta.
5-2 in the 6th. Somebody might have minus 2.5 live line. Close it out, San Diego. Let's go, let's go, let's go.
Tis the season. So coming out of this one, I believe you and I were in lockstep preseason, where you and I simply just said, who are the teams with the stars? Because those are the teams that are most likely going to make it through the regular season, most likely going to have a high seed in the postseason, meaning that just by simple process of elimination, they're going to be most likely to be viable as survivor picks almost to win the World Series. Well, here we are. This is where we're getting again to small sample size. Are you going to stick with the Dodgers to come out of the National League? Or do you maybe like that they could have a bit of an upset here, whether that's the Phillies and the 2 seed, should they meet up in the league championship series, or perhaps the Padres catch them, or if the Padres are able to come off a 2-game sweep, they're able to get that fabled, ethereal, non-tangible momentum and whatever that may be over the Dodgers, who have been off for a couple of days.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Phillies are a really good baseball team as well. They only had, I think, 4 less losses than the Dodgers. Let me actually pull up the standings. Let's see, 94 wins for the Yankees, 95 for the
3
Phillies,
games fewer.
98 for the Dodgers. So, I mean, again, on paper, I'm gonna lean the Dodgers. Again, Shohei Ohtani, the first 50 home run, 50 steal season. He's not the only MVP on that team, though. Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, obviously a really good pitching staff, a well-coached team by Dave Roberts, a guy that has won a World Series as a manager. He's won a World Series as a player, been around the block type guy. I really want to see Ohtani in the postseason. Like I said, baseball, I've not been into baseball as much as I used to be. But if Shohei Ohtani and Aaron Judge play in the World Series, I'm going to try to watch every game that I can. I'm at work some of those games. I might have it on in the background, but I'm going to be interested heavily, not just casually interested, heavily interested. So I'm going to cheer for Judge versus Ohtani, the 2 best players in the game. Dodgers and Yankees, the 2 best teams in baseball. The Phillies are scary. We've seen them make postseason runs. Superstars of their own. Bryce Harper, Kyle Schwarber. That's not a team short of superstars as well. But I'm going to go with the Dodgers. I think their pitching is going to be really good in the playoffs. Not quite as good as usual. I think it gets going in the playoffs. Give me the Dodgers meeting up as against the Yankees in the World Series. And I'll just go ahead and pick the World Series.
Sure.
Give me the Dodgers in 7. Game 7, Shohei Ohtani, walk-off home run. How's that for drama, baby? Give me the Dodgers in 7 over the Yankees. Fox Baseball is pumped. I know the World Series ratings have been down a little bit in recent years. Definitely a Texas-Arizona World Series. Not the best for ratings. I think it's going to have a well-rated World Series. Ohtani and Judge, a lot of casuals will have their eyes on it. Now, give me the Dodgers to win the whole thing. By the way, the Dodgers have been the best team in baseball the last 10 years. They've had the most wins. They've had a lot of deep playoff runs, a lot of championship appearances, World Series appearances. The fact that they only have 1 World Series in that run almost makes me think that the law of averages will give them a World Series. The Yankees, of course, like I said, the most World Series ever, 27, I believe. When I grew up as a kid, they were winning seemingly every year. They have not won since 2009. So it would be dramatic if the Yankees won. But I'll take the Dodgers in 7 games. Go Shohei Ohtani, baby.
So this is one where I'm going to do a little bit of a change up here, because I am changing who's going to win the National League. I'm going to go with the Philadelphia Phillies as the NL representative. If there's one thing that we've seen out of the Dodgers, and this is where I'm willing to extract a little bit of past performance in the sample size, is historically they've been an excellent regular season baseball team because they have a lot of talent, they have a lot of depth. There's injuries all throughout baseball. The Dodgers have the resources, more so than most, to be able to fill in those gaps as the season goes on. But then when we get into the short burst, quick twitch type of situations, that's where a team's depth becomes less and less important. Instead of having a full bullpen, you're really trusting 2 or 3 or 4 arms on a consistent basis. That's why I really like the Philadelphia Phillies. They've had a lot of postseason success as of late.
Yeah,
they have a really strong rotation. I mean, Zach Wheeler, Aaron Nola, Ranger Suarez, Christopher Sanchez all had really good seasons this year. Looking at the Dodgers starting pitching, there's some big names, but Jack Flaherty, Walker Buehler, they haven't been pitching like they have in their peaks. I'm not sure. I believe Clayton Kershaw is still on the injured list. I think he's due to come off at some point in the postseason. But even with Yoshinobu Yamamoto, I mean, 7-2 record, I believe. I don't even think he's been a super duper effective starting pitcher. So that's one where not quite to the Yankees level They don't have enough pitching, I think, to the Yankees level to match up with the superstars that they have. And let's look at the Philadelphia Phillies. They have plenty of superstars as well. Trey Turner at shortstop and leading things off. You've got a deep drive to left, and there's Nick Castellanos
Oh
who just puts a
boy.
punctuation mark on
Oh
every
boy.
event. You have a really really strong team with the Philadelphia Phillies, and they are more so built for the postseason than I feel a lot of teams are capable of being. So I really like the Phillies, and you know what? I'm going to pick the Phillies to beat the Yankees as well in the World Series. If we want to talk about superstars and storybook endings, World Series ring is the only thing that Bryce Harper is yet to achieve in his, Hall of Fame baseball career. I'm pretty sure he's going to be a Hall of Famer. I don't think it's too out of
Yes.
line to say that
Yes.
based on what he's done. I know he's had some
Yes.
injuries and some other things that have kind of kept him from maybe being like this meteoric type of player, but certainly
He's got
has
two MVPs. He's pretty
yeah,
meteoric.
like he has enough. I mean, it's like how long does he want to play for counting stats, so to speak? But recovering from Tommy John surgery, converts to first base. This is the one thing that he has yet to accomplish. I think this is the year that he gets that World Series ring. I think the Philadelphia Phillies, they are well managed. I think Phil Thompson's a good manager for them. And I think that they're just deeper and better this year than they were a couple of years back when they went up against the Houston Astros and were simply outmatched. Where it got to the end of the series with those high leverage bullpen arms that I mentioned, that the Houston Astros had seen enough times that they said, okay, we know how we want to hit against these guys and have our lineup defend against these guys. I think there's more depth, more talent on the Phillies this year than there has been in years prior, and I think it's just going to be all around a good storybook feeling with the Phillies, especially if we want to go with the whole they take down the evil Empire Yankees and all that good stuff. I think that really exciting ballpark to play at Citizens Bank. I think this is the year that the Phillies do it.
Yankees and Phillies, New York and Philadelphia, probably the two rudest fan bases in American sports. I mean, you go to Philadelphia for a football game, they boo Santa Claus. Let's not forget, first month of the season, the guy is coming off an injury. Aaron Judge gets booed by the hometown Yankees. Shame on you, New York. Shame on you, Philadelphia. Have you not heard of positive reinforcement? You don't boo Aaron Judge. That is for sure. You do not boo him. Go Dodgers.
Another thing that you can't boo are my locks of the week picks so
No,
far in the season.
pretty
We've only had a
good.
couple of shows, but had another winning week. You can't go broke taking a profit. As a quick recap on mine, I missed with the Steelers -1.5 on the road over the Colts. Every now and again, you kind of get that reminder of don't bet against a home underdog. I went with the Steelers and didn't quite get that one as the Colts came up with a pretty big win. And all of a sudden, a team that couldn't stop the run, was really struggling earlier in the season, had their starting quarterback go out with a hip injury. Once again, Joe Flacco has an opportunity to come in and play a hero for an AFC team. So the Colts won the past week, but I take a great amount of solace in the Bengals picking up a much-needed win over the Panthers and doing it by more than the betting margin at -4. And then, of course, the Bears -3 over the Rams. That game had its ups and downs to start, but by the end had all sorts of good feelings and good vibes against, a team that's really missing
Injured.
like a lot of good players. But still, I will take it.
I should have
So
gone
it's a
2-1,
2-1 week for
Tom. I
me.
went 0-3. I had a
You dabbled around, though.
something I'll never do again. I picked up the Tom Castleman and changed my pick. It works for you. It does not work for me. I had the Cowboys -6 at the Giants. The first 50-yard kick that Mr. Aubrey has missed in his whole career. I believe 15 for 15 outside of 50 yards. Thankfully, when I bet online, the line moved to -5. So I did actually push where I had money down, Tom. But for the sake of the show, it was technically -6 at the time we talked about it. So I'll take the L. Dallas losing or winning by only 5 points, not 6. Then I originally had the Commanders over on their football game. That one went over, but I changed it instead. And I originally had the Falcons and Saints over. That also hit because of the field goal at the end. I changed that pick. That was also an L. I changed it to the Dolphins Titans under 36.5. It would have hit. 4th and goal. Tennessee can kneel end the game. Instead, they run for a touchdown. Come on, Tennessee. Not cool at all. Congrats on your first one of the season against Miami's 3rd-string quarterback who just came off the street. So thank you so much, Tennessee. Bills plus 2.5 at the Ravens. That one I missed badly. I wanted to change it because I wanted Josh Allen to win so bad, but it didn't happen. So could have been 2-1. Instead, 0-3. So 2-4 on the season. You are 4-2, Tom. I'm going to stick with my gut feelings. I'm not changing anything. And I'm going to call this. Take it to the house. 3-0 betting week this week. I'll let you get started. Or do you want me to start? Doesn't matter.
No, I'll go ahead and get started. Let's go chronological on this one. Give me the Buccaneers plus 1.5 over the Atlanta Falcons. This is on Thursday Night Football. Like I said earlier, Falcons just kind of a weird team in terms of how they perform and everything. And Thursday Night Football has the potential of being kind of weird too because everybody's hurt and everybody's sore. Nobody's had enough time to rest and recover, and yet we jab at them with a stick and say, perform for us because we're bored. It's been 2 days of no football. We're bored. Play for us.
Football, come on, America.
So I'll go ahead with the Bucks plus 1.5 in that one. They just feel a bit better coached, a bit more cohesive, a bit better culture because they have a lot of returning pieces, particularly on the offensive side of the football.
Big show.
I will go ahead. I'll do something that you, Common and Shiv, do not typically like. I'm going to take an under. I'm going to take the Cowboys and the Steelers under 44.5. The Steelers' defense is really, really good, especially when you have a cornerback like Joey Porter Jr. Potentially shadowing CeeDee Lamb all over the field. That's going to force Dak Prescott to try to find some other options, and frankly, other options have been absent for the Dallas Cowboys in terms of a reliable secondary and tertiary contributor. And then flipping over to the Steelers side of things, Justin Fields has been playing much better football this season, but the Steelers offense still just feels kind of clunky. There's a lack of weapons on their end. They have George Pickens, who's, hot and cold. There's really no in-between with him. There's not really outstanding options there. And the Cowboys do have some really talented playmakers on their end to perhaps hem things in and make some plays. So I feel like this is a game that 44.5 is a fairly large number. So this is one where I feel fairly confident taking the under. And then let's go back-to-back weeks. I don't know how much I want to get hurt by the Chicago Bears, but
do it.
I'm going to have them -4 over the Panthers. This is a team where the Panthers have been putting together some better games with Andy Dalton at quarterback, but certainly the Bears are the toughest test that the Panthers are going to face to this point. Deontay Johnson had a good game against the Bengals, but he wasn't going up against Jalen Johnson. And I wonder who's going to be kind of that secondary option for the Panthers when
Xavier Legette.
Yeah, going up against Tyreek Stevenson, who's a solid cornerback in his own right. By no means a shutdown corner, but solid enough. Overall, this Bears defense is really, really strong. And then I feel like their offense, they get another soft defense upon whom they can kind of keep working some things out. And I think that this is kind of a go through the motions phase, ideally so that they have everything down pat for later on in the season when they do have some of their tougher matchups coming up, that they have the confidence, they have the practice of, okay, we know that we can execute this stuff. So now it's just a matter of continuing to do what we already know how to do. It feels like early on in the season, still spending too much time trying to figure stuff out. Bears teams are typically get better over the course of a season. They did so last year when they started 0-4, finished 7-10. This year they're 2-2. I think that they're going to pick up a win against the Panthers. With a soft schedule, definitely feel like they could have been 3-1.
The rest of the way, soft schedule too, though.
Not bad at all. Definitely something to look forward to. But this week in particular against the Panthers, I'll take them and the points, or laying the points, I believe is the betting parlance or whatever of our time.
Betting terminology down. I actually agree with all of your picks. I'm actually picking one as well. So the boys are riding together. That is the Bucks plus 1.5 at the Falcons. I talked about this one earlier. The Falcons offense doesn't look right, Tom. They got past the Saints because they got a defensive pick six, a special teams TD. Kicker made a 58-yard field goal, making all 4 of his kicks in that game. They have 5 offensive touchdowns in 4 games. Not sure if Pitt, London, Cousins, if Pitts and London are as good as advertised. I don't know if Cousins is past it or just doesn't look right in that offense, but I think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense is too high powered for the Falcons offense. I mean, Mayfield, Evans, Godwin, 33 points on the Eagles, 37 on the Commanders. They won a road game at Detroit. More explosive offense. I'm going to bet money line outright if you guys want to go ahead and do it. But for the sake of the show, I'll pick the Bucks plus 1.5 at the Falcons. I'm going to go with very early in the season. I'm not saying they're the best team in football, but at the current moment, the team that's playing the best in football, Minnesota Vikings. Only the Vikings and the Chiefs are undefeated after 4 weeks, Tom. Talk about parity. Kansas City, we know, finds a way to win. We know they're the champions. But as far as who's looked the most impressive, who's looked the most convincing, it is the Minnesota Vikings. I mean, they beat the 49ers. They spanked the Texans 34-7. The Packers game ended up being close, but they were up a lot in that game. It was almost like, I know Love was rusty, but it never felt like a game they were going to lose, Tom. I think Green Bay scored a late touchdown there to make it look closer than it really was. Even the 49ers game, San Francisco, I think, scored late in that game as well to make it closer than it looked. Minnesota's been convincing. After 3 quarters, there's not a single game they've played where you felt like they might lose. I'm almost a little bit afraid at this spread. This is in London, obviously an international game, which makes it tricky. It makes you wonder, is there something Vegas doesn't know? Because the Jets have looked pretty bad this year. I mean, they got hammered against the Niners week 1. I know it was a wet game, a sloppy game, very good Bronco defense. They had no business losing at home to the Denver Broncos. That was an embarrassing loss for the New York Football Jets. I mean, they barely beat a bad Tennessee team. The Vikings should win by 3 or more. Their defense is terrific. Justin Jefferson, the best receiver or the second best receiver in the game. Sam Darnold looks great. 3 points is not a lot. Like, there's rarely do we see a game where a team wins by 1 or 2. If you see minus 2.5 and the team is clearly better at the stage, Vikings minus 2.5, probably feel the best about this game of my 3 picks. And lastly, we were talking about the Commanders. I'm going to go with the Commanders minus 3 over the Browns. It is a pitiful Browns football team. No Max Crosby, no Devontae Adams, and the Cleveland Browns could not beat the Las Vegas Raiders. The Cowboys defense, which by the way has not stopped anybody, they look like the 1985 Bears against Cleveland. I mean, Cleveland's offense is so bad at this point. Deshaun Watson is just horrific as a player. Same situation, Tom, as in the Bucks-Falcons game, as in the Jets-Vikings game. The Jets don't have enough offense to keep up with the Vikings. The Falcons don't have enough offense to keep up with the Bucks. The Commanders don't have enough offense to keep up against the high-powered Commanders offense. I mean, let this sink in. The last 2 games, the Commanders have scored a combined 80 points. That is 40 points per game average. In 4 total games, the Browns have scored 67 points. So 13 less points in double the games. Jaden Daniels right now is a better quarterback than Deshaun Watson. Commanders are coming off a 42-14 win. You can say the Cardinals are bad. You win 42-14. I think you're playing good football. They should win by 4 or more. Commanders minus 3 over the Browns.
All right, a lot of compelling stuff to keep an eye on this weekend. A lot of exciting matchups. Common, I already got like a little bit of impromptu sports trivia in
Hit me.
there with
Oh, we
with
have
the
another
Chicago
one, or
White
that was
Sox.
your trivia?
That was just kind of like what I had spur of the moment. So, what do you have for sports trivia this evening?
Yeah, sports trivia for tonight. My question for you, Tom, is what running backs have the most 200-yard rushing games, and how many are there? There's 3 running backs that are tied for this record. Can you name
Mm.
them, and how many times have all 3 of these guys gone 200 plus rush yards?
So they're
I'm
all
going to start
tied.
off by
That's
giving you a
interesting.
clue. All 3 of these guys are amazing running backs. Like,
Are amazing, but not
yes.
necessarily in the Hall of Fame, which tells me that they might
Well,
not all be eligible yet.
okay, so one of them is in the Hall of Fame, and the
Hmm.
other 2 are not yet in the Hall of Fame because they're not eligible. I would say they're both shoe-ins. One for sure. The other, I mean, one is 100% in. Like, he'll
Hmm.
retire. The question is he first ballot? The other guy, I would say, is probably about 97% in. 1 or 2 more years, he's about to be 100%. I would say 3 of
So
the
one of them is an
top
active running back.
20 running backs of all time.
So I know. So my first guess for the active running back is going to be Derrick Henry.
With 6. And he was going to break the record. I should give you the games away, but 199 yards this last game against the Bills. Had he gotten
Oh,
one more, he
that
would
would have
have the
done it.
record by himself.
So let's see. So Derrick Henry's one.
Yep.
Let's see. I'm going to say is Adrian Peterson one.
Very nice. Adrian Peterson is 1.
Gotten more
That's
than
the
his
shoe in Hall of
fair
Famer.
share against the Bears. I think like wasn't his first game against the Bears he ran for like 273 yards or something. That was
Don't
ridiculous.
remind me. Don't remind me.
And then
Had the single game
ooh,
record 296 as well, Adrian Peterson.
mhm.
I think against the Chargers, I believe that game was.
So I want to say
Maybe his
Walter
rookie
Payton
season.
is the
Not Walter
last
Payton.
one, but I feel like Jim Brown.
Not either one of those guys.
Ooh. Okay, let's see. I'm going to go like 80s hard-nosed running back Earl Campbell.
You're getting warm. Think
Getting
70s.
70.
There's a clue I can give right now that would give it away, but I kind of want to give it, but I'm
Is
not
the
going
clue
to.
this guy was on multiple trials? Is it the juice? Is it O.J. Simpson?
The clue was not necessarily my favorite running back off the field. Allegedly has done certain things, and he may have been a part of several trials.
If he had done them, did he if he had done them, would he have written a book about them? Is it O.J.
He might
Simpson?
have written a book about it.
O.J.
And he got in jail for memorabilia related incident. They actually karma got him back.
Right.
Although it wasn't proven, and Tom, I have one saying about O.J. Simpson. I say this at work when we pull O.J. Simpson memorabilia. So I don't know if I should edit this out or just O.J.'s lawyers. I take back anything I may have insinuated because O.J.'s estate still fighting for certain things. I know Johnny Cochran has passed away, but I'm willing to bet that O.J. Simpson's current lawyers are also pretty darn good. So I'll say this about O.J. Simpson. Terrific running back on the field. Otherwise, I don't want a lawsuit, Tom. I am terrified of his lawyers. But yes, O.J. Simpson is the third running back.
I think they're preoccupied with bigger fish.
Okay.
Frankly, all
right.
That's
fair.
That's a good one. I know, like the White Sox one, I didn't have any other set trivia. That was just something as I was doing my research, I saw that come up. I was like, you know what? It's not exactly a trivia type of question, but it's just so laughably bad. Like we're looking at the Yankees with the best run I believe they have the best run differential in baseball, plus 174. But then just like what's the worst? And by a country flipping mile. Just absolutely atrocious.
Yankees plus 147. The best is the Dodgers, actually, plus 156.
Yeah, plus 156. And then in the reverse, by double, essentially.
Minus 306 by reference, Tom. The second worst run differential, the Rockies, minus 247.
Yeah.
So still pretty bad, but considerably less bad.
When the second worst team has a 60-run advantage on you, Mm.
59, but who's counting?
Yeah,
Right? Pretty
yeah,
bad.
yeah, clearly.
Pretty bad.
So for my statement of the week, because I saw like some people like do the whole like, oh, he's a complicated individual, and that's with Pete Rose passing away, and I think that this
Mhm.
is definitely an individual, a
We
situation, a
are actually.
scenario where
Do we have the same statement?
I mean we might. I
Mhm.
don't know, like this we didn't coordinate this certainly, but
No.
it's I am of the mind that one can compartmentalize how they take in things that they enjoy and how they might want to separate things. For example, football is a great example of this. I really enjoy watching football. I understand at the same time that this is an inhumane thing that these human beings are doing to each other, putting themselves in situations where they are 40 something years old and they have trouble walking, where however many players have had traumatic brain injuries. And
The
it's because
Parkinson's
of
disease. Brett
it's
Favre
it's
just
it's
announced
be,
those news.
oh yeah, there's that. I feel like that's a different thought, and I'm not going to get into. I'm not going to
Okay.
get off track on that.
Sure. Go ahead.
We're talking
Sorry.
enough about one bag. We don't need to have two bags that we're talking about in this
Sure.
segment. But it's compartmentalizing the legacy of Pete Rose and saying he absolutely can be a phenomenal baseball player, and if you enjoyed watching him play baseball, that's absolutely a fine stance to have. But I'm going to stand firm and resolute in my opinion that the Hall of Fame should absolutely continue to uphold the permanent ban on being in
Ooh.
the Hall of Fame.
Ooh.
I think that you can
Okay. Okay.
like
We have the opposite statement
we have the
essentially
opposite
from each
statements.
other.
Yes, I think
Same issue, opposite statement.
I think that it's a complicated issue, especially with what baseball and other sports have been doing in terms of promoting the gambling. But what has been the one complete, solid, by the book, etched in stone rule that every single league has had: don't bet on your own sport. We don't even want to have the slightest hint that anything could be anything less than above board when it comes to how the game is handled. I think I'm of two minds really on maintaining the permanent ban. One, you stand by your principles. There was a reason why you said there was a permanent ban on Pete Rose being inducted into the Hall of Fame. That continues to be the case. The second thing, and this is what bothered me about Ron Santos' induction into the Hall of Fame, is that it came posthumously. It came
Mhm.
after a point that he himself could have relished in and enjoyed
And that's what the NFL
being a
did
Hall
with
of Fame.
Mongo. They let Mongo in.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, he probably should have gotten in a couple years ago. But you look at this class, Antonio Gates was more
Sure.
deserving, but they wanted to make sure Mongo got in so we could see it.
Exactly. Like there is a humanity aspect to this. I think it's perfectly fine, like I said, to enjoy Pete Rose and what he did on the field, but what he did off the field in relation to the game of baseball, or not in the dugout as the manager wagering on games. That is certainly something that is quite reproachable. To say nothing of his personal life and the compartmentalization there, that has no bearing on the baseball legacy of Pete Rose. I think that you can separate those two things. But when it comes to talking about his life and his accomplishments, I certainly don't let the romanticism of the game of baseball overshadow or outweigh a lot of the troubling accusations and troubling things that he perpetuated in his own life.
Yes. So first off, I have a two-parter. I'll get to the Pete Rose in a second. Want to say R.I.P. to Dikembe Mutombo as well. Great humanitarian, also passing away. No, no, no. The finger wave. Then obviously Pete Rose passing away this week as well. Two legends. One of the best defensive centers of all time, and certainly one of the best hitters in baseball history. The hit king, most hits, most plate
Mm-hmm.
appearances, a bunch of All-Star games. Pete Rose's resume, very, very impressive. So there's a lot of guys that are in the Hall of Fame, Tom, that have done a lot of wrong things in various sports, a lot of illegal activities, whether that be drinking and driving, whether that be assault to, a family member, a female, whoever it may be. We've had guys, getting caught for various, substances. I guess in baseball, those guys are not getting in, but there's a lot of controversy as Charles Barkley says, I'm not a role model. Charles Barkley has gambled after sports. Like, there's a lot of guys that are in Hall of Fames that are not necessarily good people. They have done immoral things. They've done wrong things. I'm not saying I support Pete Rose gambling because even though I love gambling myself, I obviously understand why you shouldn't do it in the context of the sport. But I'm going to go different here in saying that there is guys that have done worse things in the history of sports that are in Hall of Fames. And the only thing they have Pete Rose, they've caught him betting as a manager. So only on his team, by the way. So he's not tossing games that we know of. But everything that I have found out about Tom, as far as Pete Rose's gambling, was him betting on the Reds. So he has not influenced games. He's not throwing games, so to speak. And this was done as a manager. So if I were the baseball commissioner, I would say, Pete Rose, you can never manage a baseball game again. That is a very fair thing, not allowed to be a manager. But I look at Pete Rose's playing career, the most hits in the history of baseball. The Baseball Hall of Fame has become a thing like, for example, Curt Schilling. Curt Schilling is a horrible human being. I'm sorry, Curt. He said a lot of bad things. There's a lot of issues I have with Curt Schilling. I don't like Curt Schilling one bit, Tom Castleman. Curt Schilling had a Hall of Fame career. This isn't the goody tissues or the moral police reward. The Hall of Fame of a given sport should be based on the playing career you had as a player, or in the case, if you're a manager, the managerial career you had, which Pete Rose, I'm not arguing for him as a managerial entrance. Pete Rose as a player has the most hits in the history of baseball. Baseball has been played since the 1800s. Yeah, longevity. He had the most plate appearances. But if you have the most hits in the history of the game, you don't have any illegal performance substances that he's used. He's never been caught. Pete Rose, I'm not saying he's in the Hall of Fame of MLB morality. Pete Rose should be in the Hall of Fame. One interesting side note on this, though, I do agree about the posthumous thing. I know Pete Rose's family has been on record saying that if he does eventually get put in, they're not really going to go. They're not really going to honor it. So I could almost, like, at this point, like, now that he's passed away, to me, the issue doesn't matter as much. It's not as pressing. I would have liked to seen Pete Rose get inducted years ago. I think he deserves that chance. I think his career is iconic. Pete Rose, for me, the Hall of Fame is who you are as a player. And we can definitely agree Pete Rose, without question, as a player, Hall of Fame worthy player, Pete Rose. So.
Indeed. No, I like ending the note, though, on a better individual, and Dikembe Mutombo, somebody who had a lot of joy in his life, brought a lot of good, like, literally
58, way too young.
Way too young.
58,
and
brain cancer, just tragic, Tom.
I believe it was Joakim Noah who was talking about how the way the players referred to Dikembe Mutombo was they called him Monsieur Ambassador because of all the work that he was doing in Africa, building hospitals, making a better life for people on the continent that has been historically much maligned and taken advantage of. So a wonderful individual there. Certainly had a fun-loving spirit as well. They're saying, hey, I can rest easy knowing that if the actor for Cookie Monster calls in sick, Dikembe Mutombo that is there to take up the call, and just a really, like, fun-loving individual. Trash talking Michael Jordan. There was a classic video going around where
I've seen it on Twitter. He's like, he's telling Michael, "You've never got
like,
me.
no,
never
like,
got
call
me.
up Scotty.
Scotty
got me, but you haven't gotten me."
All right,
and
then
then
he
Michael
got him once.
Got one time, and that's all it takes is that one time. But that's certainly a much better person and note upon which to end a happy trail segment for the show.
Agreed. So fantastic show, Tom Castleman. We'll be back at some point. Might be a couple-week break. We'll figure it out, but we'll be back at some point talking NFL, college football, all that and plenty more. Baseball playoffs, NBA, not too far around the corner. October's a really good sport because at the end of October, we have the start of basketball, we have the World Series, obviously football season in full swing, hockey starting up. For me, as a soccer fan, Champions League, soccer heating up. So going to be an awesome, awesome sports month. We'll definitely be updating you guys on all the news, Tom. Always a pleasure to do the show, man. Have a good night, and thank you to all the listeners, the viewers. You guys are the best.